Vector stood in the observation deck of the Galactic Council station and stared at the holographic display. His 4 eyes traced the ship movements in the contested sector. The blue markers represented human vessels. The red swarm showed the Dravix fleet. Numbers scrolled beside each marker: weapons, shields, crew counts, everything measured and categorized. He touched his datapad with his long fingers. The assignment was clear. Watch the humans fight. Record everything. Report back to the council. Simple work for someone of his rank and experience. Vector had spent 40 cycles studying warfare. He knew every major battle in galactic history. He had analyzed countless combat recordings. His people, the Qualthari, were masters of military theory. They won wars through careful planning and rigid discipline. Every soldier knew their place. Every tactic followed ancient protocols tested over thousands of years. Humans were different. Vector had read the briefing files 3 times, and each time he felt more confused. Humans had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. They flew ships that looked like they were held together with spare parts. Their military structure seemed chaotic. Different commanders made different decisions. They had no unified combat doctrine. The Council wanted to know if humans deserved military support against the Dravix. Most Council members thought humans were too primitive to matter. Some said humans would die quickly and the Dravix problem would grow worse. Others argued that any species fighting the Dravix deserved help. Vector believed the first group was right. Humans would lose. He would document their failure. The Council would learn from their mistakes. That was the natural order of things. A shuttle arrived to take him to his observation ship. Vector gathered his equipment and climbed aboard. The pilot, a quiet Threxian, said nothing during the short flight. Vector appreciated the silence. He reviewed the human personnel files again. Captain Taiho commanded the human flagship, a vessel called Defiant Hope. The name itself seemed foolish to Vector. Hope was not a military strategy. The captain's file showed a career full of unconventional decisions. He had been court-martialed twice for disobeying orders. Both times he was later given medals for the same actions. Lieutenant Hana served as tactical officer. Her scores in military academy were perfect. Yet she chose to serve on a frontier vessel instead of taking a comfortable position on Earth. Her file noted that she thinks differently than standard tactical officers. Vector did not understand what that meant. Sergeant Junho led the Marine units. His record showed over 300 combat drops. He had been wounded 17 times. He refused promotion 4 times because he wanted to stay with his unit. Vector found this baffling. In Qualthari culture, refusing advancement was shameful. Dr. Yuna ran the medical section. Her file was the strangest of all. She had been a civilian doctor on Earth, living a safe and wealthy life. When the Dravix attacked a human colony, she volunteered for military service. She gave up everything to serve on a warship. The file did not explain why. The observation ship was small and fast. It had powerful sensors and stealth technology. Vector would be able to watch the battle from a safe distance without being detected. He settled into his station and activated the systems. The ship's AI greeted him in a flat, emotionless voice. "Observer Vector, we are approaching the Theta sector. Human fleet detected. 12 vessels. Dravix fleet detected. Approximately 400 vessels." Vector's primary heart skipped a beat. 400 to 12. The humans were outnumbered more than 30 to 1. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. His observation ship moved into position behind a large asteroid. The sensors locked onto the human fleet. Vector adjusted the holographic display to show a better view. The human ships looked worse in person than in the photographs. Defiant Hope had burn marks along its hull. Obvious repair plates covered sections of the armor. One of the engine pods looked like it came from a completely different ship class. The other human vessels were in similar condition. Vector began recording. He noted the time, the position of both fleets, and the tactical situation. His duty was to remain objective. He would watch, record, and analyze. Nothing more. The Dravik's fleet emerged from the debris field like a rising wave. Their bioships moved in perfect coordination. The Dravik's were insectoids, and their ships worked like a hive mind. No communication delays, no confusion, just pure, efficient killing. The human fleet should have retreated. Every tactical calculation said withdrawal was the only logical choice. Vector waited for the humans to turn and run. Instead, Captain Taiho's voice came across the open communication channel. Vector had set his sensors to monitor all frequencies. The captain's voice was calm, almost casual. "All ships, this is Taiho, weapons free. Let's show them why Earth's still spinning." The human ships accelerated toward the Dravik's fleet. Vector felt a strange sensation in his chest. They were charging. 12 broken ships against 400 perfectly coordinated bio-vessels. It was not brave. It was insane. But then Vector saw something that made him lean closer to his display. The human ships were not following any formation he recognized. Each vessel moved independently, yet somehow they maintained spacing. They wove between debris, using cover that Vector's own tactical programs had not identified. The first Dravik's wave hit the humans like a hammer. Weapons fire lit up the darkness. The human point ship, a destroyer called Last Light, took multiple hits. Its shields flared and collapsed. Vector expected the ship to explode. Instead, Last Light spun hard and dove beneath the Dravik's line. Its weapons fired in all directions as it spun. 3 Dravik's ships exploded. The destroyer came up behind the enemy formation and fired into their unprotected engines. Vector's training said this was impossible. A ship with failed shields should retreat or die. It should not attack. But Last Light had turned its weakness into an advantage. Defiant Hope led the main assault. Lieutenant Hana's voice came through the channel, calling out targets and firing solutions. Her calculations were faster than Vector's own tactical computer. She saw patterns in the Dravik's movement before Vector's sensors registered them. 2 human frigates broke formation and charged straight at a cluster of Dravik's bio-cruisers. Vector marked them as lost. No frigate could survive that many heavy ships. But the frigates were not attacking the cruisers. They fired missiles at the debris field ahead of the Dravik's ships. The explosions sent huge chunks of metal spinning into the enemy formation. The Dravik ships, moving in tight coordination, could not dodge fast enough. 6 cruisers were destroyed by their own momentum. Vector stopped recording and just watched. This was not chaos. This was something else. Something he had no words for. The battle continued for hours. Humans lost ships. The destroyer Morning Dawn exploded with all hands. The frigate Determination was cut in half by Dravik's weapons. Bodies floated in the void, tiny lights from their suits growing dimmer. But the humans kept fighting. When Defiant Hope lost its main engines, Vector thought the flagship was finished. Captain Taiho gave an order that Vector would never forget. "Use the spin. All starboard batteries rotating fire pattern. Hana, you have the timing." The dead ship became a rotating weapons platform. Lieutenant Hana calculated the spin rate and synchronized the weapons. Defiant Hope could not move, but it became a whirlwind of destruction. Any Dravik ship that came close was shredded by perfectly timed fire. Then Vector saw Sergeant Junho's action. The Marine units launched from Defiant Hope in small drop pods. They crossed open space while Dravik ships fired at them. Half the pods were destroyed. The survivors landed on a Dravik's biocruiser and cut their way inside. Vector watched them fight through the interior of the enemy ship. They planted explosives in the core and evacuated. The cruiser exploded just as the last Marines reached safety. Only 15 of the 30 who launched made it back. The Draviks finally withdrew. They had lost over 100 ships. The humans had lost 3 vessels and taken heavy damage to the rest. By any measure, the Draviks had won. They still outnumbered the humans 3-1. But Vectar looked at the display and felt something crack inside his carefully ordered mind. The humans had not retreated. They had not followed proper tactics. They had broken every rule of engagement Vectar knew. And they were still there, still fighting, still refusing to die. A transmission came from Defiant Hope. It was directed at his observation ship. Vectar's stealth systems should have made detection impossible, but Captain Taiho's face appeared on the screen, looking tired and covered in soot. Observer Vectar, I know you're out there. I know you're watching. If you want to see what humans are really about, dock with us during the repair period. We'll show you what you came to see. The transmission ended. Vectar sat in his chair and realized his hands were shaking. In 40 cycles of military study, he had never felt anything like this. Fear, confusion, and something else. Something that felt almost like excitement. He had come here to watch humans die. Instead, he had watched them refuse to the repair period lasted 36 hours. The human fleet had retreated to a damaged space station in the outer system. Vectar's observation ship sat in the shadow of an ice moon for the first 12 hours. He told himself he was simply maintaining proper distance. Observers did not interact with their subjects. That was the first rule. But Captain Taiho's invitation kept echoing in his mind. Vectar had spent his entire career studying warfare from recordings and reports. He had never spoken to a warrior during an actual campaign. The rules said he should not. His curiosity said he must. He docked with Defiant Hope 20 hours after the battle ended. A young human crew member met him at the airlock. The human was female, barely past adolescence, with burn marks on her uniform. Observer Vectar, Captain Taiho is expecting you. I'm Ensign Nari. Follow me. Please. Vectar followed the ensign through the ship's corridors. The interior looked worse than the exterior. Burn marks scarred the walls. Some corridors were sealed with emergency barriers. Repair crews worked everywhere, their faces exhausted. Some crew members were sleeping in the hallways, too tired to reach their quarters. But what struck Vectar most was the sound. Laughter. Humans were laughing. He passed a group of engineers working on a damaged power conduit. One made a joke. The others laughed even as they worked with hands covered in grease and blood. Ensign Nari saw his confusion. We laugh or we cry, observer. We choose to laugh when we can. The bridge was a controlled disaster. Tactical displays showed red damage indicators across every system. Lieutenant Hana stood at her station, still working despite obvious exhaustion. Her hands moved across the controls, running simulations and calculations. Captain Taiho sat in the command chair, drinking something from a battered cup. He looked up when Vectar entered. Observer, welcome aboard. Coffee? Vectar did not know what coffee was. He shook his head, all 4 of his eyes focusing on the captain. Captain Taiho, your tactics in the engagement were highly irregular. Taiho smiled. It was not a happy expression. Irregular. That's a polite way of saying insane. I did not say insane. I said irregular. But you thought it. Taiho stood and walked to the main display. He pulled up a tactical map of the battle. You're Qualthari, right? I read about your people. You've been studying war for thousands of years. Perfect tactics, perfect discipline. Yes. The Qualthari way has proven successful across countless engagements. And if we'd followed your perfect tactics, we'd all be dead right now. Taiho pointed at the display. Look at this. We were outnumbered 30-1. Our ships are old. Our weapons are outdated. By every calculation, we should have retreated. Yes, retreat was the logical choice. Logical. Right. Taiho turned to face him. Observer, you want to understand humans? Then understand this. We don't fight logically, we fight desperately. There's a difference. Lieutenant Hana spoke without looking up from her station. The Draviks destroyed 12 human colonies before we stopped them here. 2 million people dead. One of those colonies was my home. I watched it burn from orbit because my ship arrived too late. She finally looked at Vectar. So when you ask why we didn't retreat, the answer is simple. We can't retreat anymore. There's nowhere left to go. Vectar felt uncomfortable. The Qualthari did not discuss emotions during military operations. Feelings were for after the battle, expressed through proper ritual. But humans seemed to carry their emotions into combat itself. Your tactics were effective, Vectar said carefully, but they appeared chaotic. Each ship operated independently. There was no unified formation. Taiho laughed. That's because rigid formations get you killed. We adapt. Each captain knows the mission and makes their own decisions. Sometimes it looks like chaos, but it's organized chaos. That is a contradiction in terms. Is it? Hana, show our guest the firing solution you used on the Dravik's cruiser cluster. Lieutenant Hana pulled up the data. Vectar studied it and felt his confusion deepen. The calculation was brilliant. She had predicted Dravik's movement patterns 12 seconds before they happened. But the method she used was nothing like standard tactical programming. How did you create this? Vectar asked. I didn't create it. I felt it. Hana shrugged at his expression. The Draviks move in patterns because they're a hive mind. But patterns can be read. I watch the way they flow and I know where they'll be. It's not math. It's intuition. Intuition is not reliable. Intuition kept us alive today. Hana returned to her work. You can calculate all you want, observer, but when you're in the fight, when people are dying around you, sometimes you have to trust your gut. Captain Taiho gestured for Vectar to follow him off the bridge. They walked through more damaged corridors until they reached a large room. The sign said, Marine Bay. Inside, dozens of soldiers were preparing equipment, cleaning weapons, and treating minor injuries. Sergeant Junho stood in the center, giving instructions to his unit. He saw the captain and walked over. His face was scarred, his armor dented. One arm was in a medical brace. Captain, observer. Junho nodded to both of them. Junho led the boarding action, Taiho said. 30 Marines went out. 15 came back. Vectar looked at the sergeant. You lost half your unit. Yes. Junho's voice was flat. And I'll remember every name until I die. In Qualthari culture, acceptable losses are calculated before each engagement. 15 dead from 30 is within normal parameters for such a mission. Junho's expression turned cold. They weren't parameters. They were people. Corporal Minho had a daughter who just turned 6. Private Suji joined up after her colony was destroyed. Specialist Daehun was getting married next month. He stepped closer to Vectar. Don't you dare call them acceptable losses. Taiho put a hand on Junho's shoulder. Easy, Sergeant. Junho took a breath and stepped back. Sorry, Captain, but someone needs to tell the observer that numbers on a screen were people who laughed and cried and bled. Vectar felt something unfamiliar in his chest. Shame. The Qualthari did honor their dead, but through ceremony and ritual, not raw emotion. Junho's anger was improper, but it was also honest in a way Vectar had never encountered. I apologize, Sergeant, I spoke without understanding. Junho studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. You want to understand humans? Come with me. He led Vectar to a wall covered in photographs and names. Hundreds of them. Each had a small light beside it. This is our memorial wall. Every person who died serving on this ship. We add to it after every battle. Junho pointed to the newest section. These are from today. 15 Marines, 42 other crew, 57 people who were alive yesterday. Vectar looked at the faces. Young and old, male and female, all human, all dead. Each photograph showed them smiling, living, being more than just casualties. "We fight for them," Junho said quietly. "The ones who died and the ones still living. We fight for each other. That's why we don't retreat. That's why we take insane risks. Because if we don't, someone we love will die next." A young woman approached them. She wore a private's uniform and had bandages on her face. She stopped in front of the wall and touched one photograph gently. "That's Private Suji," Junho said. "She made it back from the boarding action. The man in the photo is her brother. He died 6 months ago during the colony evacuation." Suji spoke without turning. "He stayed behind to help others escape. Saved 40 people before the Draviks got him." She finally looked at Vectar. "My whole family is gone. This crew is my family now. So yeah, we fight like we're crazy, because we're protecting our home." She walked away. Vectar watched her go, then looked back at the memorial wall. In Qualthari culture, warriors fought for glory and honor. Those were abstract concepts, noble and pure, but humans fought for something more immediate, more visceral. They fought for love. "Observer, you should meet our chief medical officer," Taiho said. "She'll give you another perspective." They found Dr. Yuna in the medical bay. She was working on a wounded crew member, her hands steady despite obvious exhaustion. She finished the procedure, gave instructions to a nurse, and walked over to them. "Captain, observer." She pulled off her gloves. They were stained with blood. "What can I do for you?" "I wanted Observer Vectar to understand why we fight the way we do." Yuna smiled tiredly. "He wants to know why we're all crazy." "I did not say that." "You thought it. Everyone does." Yuna led them to her office, a tiny room filled with medical texts and personal items. A photograph on her desk showed her with a group of smiling civilians. "That's my old hospital team on Earth. I was chief of surgery at one of the best hospitals in Seoul. Had a beautiful apartment, great pay, respect. Then the Draviks attacked the Kepler colony." "You were not there," Vectar said. "No, but I watched the news reports, saw the casualties. 2 million dead and millions more wounded. The military was overwhelmed. They needed doctors." She picked up the photograph. "I volunteered. My hospital team thought I was insane. Maybe I was. But I couldn't keep living my comfortable life while people were dying. That is highly irregular. Most medical professionals would not abandon successful careers. Most medical professionals didn't watch children getting pulled from burning buildings. Most didn't see ships full of refugees with nowhere to go." Yuna set down the photograph. "Observer, you want to understand humans? We're not special. We're not particularly brave. We're just stubborn. When we see something wrong, something unfair, we can't let it go. It eats at us until we do something about it. Even if the odds are against you? Especially then. Hope isn't about odds, Observer. It's about what we choose to believe when everything's falling apart." An alarm sounded throughout the ship. Lieutenant Hana's voice came through the communication system. "Captain to the bridge. Sensors detecting massive Draviks fleet movement. They're coming back." Everyone moved immediately. Taiho ran for the bridge. Junho headed to the Marine Bay. Yuna began preparing the medical bay for casualties. Vectar followed the captain, his mind racing. On the bridge, the main display showed a terrifying sight. The Draviks had brought reinforcements. Over 600 ships were moving toward the human position. Lieutenant Hana's voice was calm despite the numbers. "Sir, they'll be in weapons range in 3 hours. Our fleet is at 40% combat effectiveness. Most ships don't even have main engines online yet." Taiho stared at the display. Vectar watched the captain's face. He expected to see fear or desperation. Instead, he saw determination. A message came through from the Galactic Council. Vectar's own superiors offering the humans an escape. "Human fleet. The Council authorizes full retreat. This battle is lost. Withdraw to Council space immediately. No dishonor in survival. Every eye on the bridge turned to Captain Taiho. He stood silently for a moment, then touched the communication control. Tell the Council we didn't come here to run. We came here to draw a line. This is where we make our stand. He closed the channel and looked at his crew. All ships, prepare for battle. We've got 3 hours. Make them count. The crew moved without hesitation. Vectar stood frozen. The humans were not retreating. They were going to fight a battle they absolutely could not win. Taiho noticed him standing there. Observer, this would be a good time for you to return to your ship. This is going to get bad. Vectar thought about his observation ship. Safe, shielded, hidden. He could watch from a distance, record everything, and remain untouched by what was about to happen. But he looked at Lieutenant Hana running combat simulations with tears in her eyes. At Ensign Nari checking weapon systems with shaking hands. At Captain Taiho, who stood calm in the face of certain death. I will stay, Vectar heard himself say, if you permit it. Taiho studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. Welcome to the crew, Observer. Let's show you what humanity really means. The Dravik's fleet came through slipspace like a nightmare made real. 600 bioships, each one a living weapon grown in the spawning pools of the Dravik's homeworld. They moved with perfect coordination, a swarm with a single mind and a single purpose. Kill everything. Vectar stood at a secondary station on the bridge of Defiant Hope. Captain Taiho had offered him a seat and access to the ship's sensors. Vectar had accepted, though his training screamed that this was wrong. Observers did not participate. They watched from safety and recorded without bias. But Vectar was no longer sure he could remain unbiased. The last 30 hours aboard the human ship had changed something inside him. He saw the faces on the memorial wall every time he closed his eyes. He heard Private Suji's voice telling him about her dead brother. He remembered Dr. Yuna's tired smile as she explained why she gave up everything to be here. The human fleet was in terrible shape. 9 ships remained combat-capable, though that term was generous. Defiant Hope had only 60% power. The destroyer Last Light had no shields at all. The frigate Determination II, hastily renamed after its predecessor's destruction, was literally held together with emergency force fields. Lieutenant Hana stood at her tactical station, running calculations faster than any computer. Her fingers danced across the controls. Sweat ran down her face. She had not slept since the last battle. "Captain, I have a firing solution," she said. "It's insane, but it might work." "I like insane." Taiho leaned forward in his chair. "Show me." Hana pulled up a holographic display. It showed the human fleet, the Dravik swarm, and the debris field between them. Red lines traced impossible trajectories through the chaos. "The Draviks are coming straight at us in a wall formation. They're using their numbers to overwhelm our point defenses. Standard tactics say we should spread out and try to flank them." "Which would get us killed in 5 minutes," Taiho said. "Right. So instead we charge straight at them." Vectar could not stay silent. "That is suicide." Hana glanced at him. "Yeah, it is. But if we do it right, we can break their formation. They're hive-minded. They rely on perfect coordination. If we disrupt that, even for a few seconds, we can do serious damage." "How?" Vectar asked. "We use our damaged ships as missiles. The 3 vessels that can't maneuver, we load them with explosives and drive them straight into the Dravik center. While they're dealing with that, the rest of us cut through their flanks." Vectar felt horror rise in his chest. "The crews on those ships." "We'll evacuate first," Taiho said quietly. "We're not that crazy. But yes, we're sacrificing 3 ships. Because if we don't, we lose all 9. A communication channel opened. A woman's face appeared on the screen. She looked old for a human, her hair gray, her face lined with years. This is Captain G1 of Morning Star. I'll take point on the suicide run." Two other captains volunteered immediately. Vector listened as they made plans to die. Their voices were calm. They joked about who would cause the biggest explosion. They made the other captains promise to remember their crews. "All ships. This is Taiho. We have 1 hour until the Draviks reach weapons range. Everyone knows the plan. This is going to be the fight of our lives. Some of us won't make it, but that's okay. We're going to make every second count, for Earth, for the colonies, for everyone we've lost. Let's show these bugs why humans don't quit." The communication channels filled with acknowledgments, voices from 9 damaged ships, from thousands of exhausted humans, all agreeing to do the impossible one more time. Vector turned to Taiho. "Captain, I must ask, why do you fight battles you cannot win?" Taiho looked at him with tired eyes. "Because someone has to. If we don't stop them here, they go to the next system, then the next. Eventually, they reach Earth, my home, my family, my people." He gestured at the memorial wall visible through the bridge entrance. "We fight because that's what humans do. We stand up, even when we should sit down, especially then." The hour passed too quickly. Vector watched the crew prepare. Ensign Nari double-checked weapon systems, her hands shaking. Lieutenant Hana ran her simulations one last time, whispering numbers under her breath. Sergeant Junho briefed his Marines on boarding procedures they probably would not survive. Then the Draviks were there, filling the sensors with red hostiles. 600 ships against 9. The numbers were impossible. The outcome was predetermined. "All ships, weapons free," Taiho said calmly. "Let's dance." The human fleet accelerated toward the enemy. Vector's tactical training screamed that this was wrong. 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 You did not charge a superior force. You maneuvered. You created advantages. You did not throw yourself into the teeth of the enemy. But the humans had no choice. They were out of time, out of space, out of options, so they chose to go down fighting. Morning Star led the charge, flanked by 2 other damaged vessels. Captain Jiwan's voice came through the channel one last time. "For Earth, for my crew, for everyone who comes after." The 3 ships hit the Dravik's center line at full speed. The explosions lit up space like 3 small suns. Dozens of Dravik's ships were destroyed instantly. The perfect formation shattered. "Now!" Hana screamed. The remaining 6 human ships dove into the gap. Vector's sensors could barely track the movements. The humans wove between Dravik's ships, firing at point-blank range. They used debris as cover, enemy ships as shields. It was chaos. It was madness. It was working. Defiant hope spun through a cloud of Dravik's fighters, all weapons firing. Lieutenant Hana's targeting was inhuman. Every shot hit. Every maneuver brought them into better position. She was not calculating. She was flowing, moving with instinct and desperation. Vector heard a sound and realized it was coming from his own throat. He was making a clicking noise, a Qualthari sound of battle joy. He had never made that sound before. It came from warriors in the thick of combat, something he had only read about. But he was in combat now. He could feel every impact on the ship's hull, smell the burning circuits, hear the screams when a power conduit exploded near the bridge. This was war, real, immediate, terrifying, and Vector could not look away. A Dravik's boarding party cut through the hull near the observation deck. Alarms sounded, security teams rushed to respond, but Vector could see the tactical display. The security teams were too far away. The Draviks would reach the engine room before anyone could stop them. He acted without thinking. Vector left the bridge and ran toward the breach. His long legs covered ground quickly. He reached the corridor just as the Draviks broke through. 5 of them, insectoid nightmares with blade arms and acid weapons. A young human stood between them and the engine room door. Petty Officer Nari, the same ensign who had met him at the airlock. She held a wrench in both hands, her face pale with terror. "Get back!" she shouted at the Draviks. "You're not getting through!" They did not understand human language. They did not care. They advanced on her, ready to kill. Vector had never held a weapon in combat. He was an observer, an analyst, a scholar of warfare who had never fought. But he grabbed a plasma cutter from the wall and charged. The first Dravix turned toward him. He swung the cutter like a club. The blade activated on impact, cutting through the alien's carapace. Green blood sprayed. The Dravix fell. The other four attacked. Vector felt pain as a blade arm slashed across his chest. He ignored it. He cut, stabbed, and fought with a fury he did not know he possessed. Nari joined him, her wrench crashing into Dravix's heads. Security arrived 30 seconds later. They found Vector and Nari standing over 5 dead Dravix. Vector was bleeding from a dozen wounds. Nari was sobbing, but the engine room was safe. A medic tried to treat Vector's injuries. He pushed past them and returned to the bridge. His uniform was soaked in blood, both his own and alien. He took his station and resumed monitoring the battle. Taiho looked at him but said nothing. Lieutenant Hana glanced over and nodded once. That was enough. The battle raged for 6 hours. The humans lost 2 more ships. Destroyer Last Light went down fighting to the end, taking 12 Dravix ships with it. Frigate Steadfast was boarded, and the crew fought the Dravix hand-to-hand through the corridors before the ship exploded. Sergeant Junho led 3 more boarding actions. Each time, fewer Marines came back. On the 3rd run, only 5 returned. Junho was wounded, but still giving orders, still leading, still refusing to stop. Dr. Yuna worked without pause in the medical bay. Vector saw recordings later. She performed 30 surgeries in 6 hours. When the bay was overrun by wounded, she triaged in the corridors, deciding who could be saved and who would die. She cried while she worked, tears running down her face, but her hands never shook. And through it all, Lieutenant Hana fought her own battle at the tactical station. She found patterns in the chaos, weak points in the Dravix formation, opportunities that appeared for seconds before vanishing. She pushed the human fleet through impossible maneuvers, keeping them alive minute by minute. Then she saw it, the opening they needed. "Captain, the Dravix command ship. It's in the center of their formation. If we can take it out, their coordination will fail." Taiho looked at the display. The command ship was surrounded by hundreds of defenders. Getting to it would cost everything they had left. "Can you make the shot?" Hana studied the numbers. Vector saw her hands shaking, saw the doubt in her eyes. This was not instinct. This was mathematics. One shot through a maze of friendly and enemy vessels, through debris and weapons fire at a target kilometers away. "I don't know," she whispered. Taiho stood and walked to her station. He put a hand on her shoulder. "Hana, you've made every impossible shot today. One more. For all of them." He gestured at the memorial wall. "Make it count." Hana closed her eyes, took a breath, opened them. Firing solution locked. All power to main weapons. The ship shuddered as every system shut down to feed the main gun. Lights dimmed. Life support went to minimum. Everything they had, everything they were, went into one shot. "Fire," Taiho said quietly. The weapon discharged. Vector watched the projectile arc through space, threading between ships, past debris, through the impossible maze. It seemed to move in slow motion, though he knew it was traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. It hit. The Dravix command ship exploded. The blast wave took out 20 nearby vessels, and suddenly the Dravix fleet lost coordination. Ships collided with each other. Formations fell apart. The hive mind was disrupted. "All ships! Hit them now!" Taiho shouted. The 4 remaining human ships poured fire into the confused enemy. Dravix ships died by the dozens. The swarm that had seemed unstoppable broke and scattered. And then they were retreating. 600 ships had become less than 300, and those survivors were fleeing. The humans had won. The bridge of Defiant Hope was silent. Crew members stared at their displays in disbelief. They had survived. Against every calculation, every prediction, every logical outcome, they had survived. Lieutenant Hana collapsed in her chair, sobbing. Ensign Nari hugged her station and laughed hysterically. Captain Taiho sat down heavily, suddenly looking 100 years old. Vectar stood at his station, covered in blood, wounded and exhausted. He had violated every observer protocol. He had fought. He had killed. He had become part of what he was supposed to only watch. Taiho looked at him. "You fought with us. Your crew now. For what it's worth." Vectar felt something wet on his face. He touched it with a shaking hand. Tears. An emotion his species had suppressed for generations through discipline and ritual. He was crying. "I came here to watch you die," Vectar said. "I stayed because you taught me how to live." The captain smiled wearily. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me after a battle." Damage reports came in. 4 ships survived out of 12. Casualties were catastrophic, over 2,000 humans dead. The wounded filled every available space, but the line had held. The Draviks were retreating, and humanity was still here. Vectar looked at the memorial wall. Soon it would have hundreds of new names, new photographs, new lights, each one a person who had laughed and cried and fought and died. For the first time in his life, Vectar understood what it meant to fight for something larger than yourself. Not for honor, not for glory, but for the person standing next to you, for the people counting on you, for a future you might never see. The humans had taught him that, and he would never be the same. 3 weeks later, Vectar stood in the central chamber of the Galactic Council. Representatives from 200 species filled the massive hall. They had gathered to hear his report on humanity's combat effectiveness. They expected a standard analysis, tactical assessments, casualty ratios, recommendations on whether humans deserved military support. Vectar had prepared something different. He wore his observer uniform, though it felt strange now. He had spent the last weeks aboard Defiant Hope as the human fleet limped back to their space. He had helped repair systems. He had attended memorial services. He had listened to humans tell stories about their fallen friends. He was no longer the same Qualthari who had left the council station 4 weeks ago. That person had been hollow, empty, a scholar who studied war without understanding it. The council chairman, an ancient Voktar with 6 arms and a voice like grinding stone, addressed the chamber. "Observer Vectar, you were sent to document humanity's engagement with the Dravik swarm. Present your findings." Vectar activated his data pad. The holographic display filled the air above the chamber floor. But instead of charts and tactical maps, he showed recordings, battle footage, and faces. "Council members, I was sent to observe humanity's final stand. I witnessed something that cannot be measured in tactical readouts or casualty reports. I witnessed the death of my own understanding of warfare and the birth of something I cannot name, only honor." He showed them Captain Jiwan's final charge, the explosion of Morning Star, and the 2 other ships whose crews had evacuated but whose captains had stayed to pilot them to their targets. He showed them Sergeant Junho's boarding actions, Marines fighting through impossible odds. He showed them Lieutenant Hana at her station, tears streaming down her face as she made calculations faster than any computer. He showed them Private Suji standing in front of the memorial wall, touching her brother's photograph. "Humans do not fight like any species in this council," Vectar said. His voice echoed through the silent chamber. "They fight with fear in their hearts, but courage in their actions. They fight knowing they will probably die, but choosing to fight anyway. They fight not for territory or resources or even survival. They fight for each other." The council members stirred uncomfortably. This was not a standard report. Vectar did not care. He showed them the moment he abandoned his observation post. the moment he fought alongside Petty Officer Nari, his own blood mixing with alien blood on the deck of a human ship. I violated observer protocols. I engaged in combat. I became part of what I was meant to only watch. I did this because I could not remain who I was. That person was empty. These humans, these warriors who should have died but refused to, they showed me what I had lost. He showed them more footage. Dr. Yuna performing surgery with tears running down her face. Engineers working 30-hour shifts to keep dying ships alive. Crew members laughing even as they prepared for battles they knew they might not survive. You asked me to determine if humans deserve our military support. I tell you this, we do not deserve theirs. The chamber erupted. Council members shouted objections. How dare an observer make such statements? This was not analysis, this was emotion. Vector had clearly been compromised. The chairman called for order. When the chamber quieted, he addressed Vector with cold formality. Observer, your report is highly irregular. You have shown clear bias. You participated in combat, violating fundamental observer protocols. Your analysis cannot be trusted. Then do not trust my analysis, Vector said calmly. Trust the recordings. Trust the numbers. 12 human ships faced 600 Dravix vessels. 4 human ships survived. The Dravix retreated. Those are facts. At tremendous cost, another council member said. 2,000 casualties, 3/4 of their fleet destroyed. This is evidence of poor tactics, not effectiveness. Vector felt anger rise in his chest. 2,000 casualties, each one with a name, a face, a family. Humans do not see acceptable losses. They see people who will never go home. He pulled up the image of the memorial wall aboard Defiant Hope. Hundreds of photographs, thousands of names, each one honored individually. Your species fight with perfect tactics, optimal formations, minimal casualties, and you lose. Again and again, you lose, because you have forgotten what humans understand instinctively. War is not about tactics. It is about will. The will to stand when you should fall. The will to fight when you should flee. The will to sacrifice yourself so others can live. He showed them Corporal Minho's final transmission. The pilot who crashed his ship into a Dravix carrier to save a damaged human frigate. Tell my daughter I kept my promise. Tell her daddy made it count. That is what humans fight for, not glory, not honor. For their daughters, for their sons, for the person standing next to them in the battle line. And that is why they win when they should lose. The council chairman stood. Observer Vector, this council finds your report to be emotionally compromised and tactically unsound. You are hereby stripped of your observer status. You will return to Qualthar space for disciplinary review. Vector had expected this. He reached up and removed his observer insignia, the badge he had worn for 40 cycles. He set it on the chamber floor. I resign my position. I am no longer an observer. I am no longer Qualthari military. I request asylum with the human fleet. The chamber erupted again. This was unprecedented. Observers did not resign. They did not abandon their species for the subjects they studied. But Vector was done with observation. He had been changed by what he witnessed, by what he participated in. He could not go back to studying war from safety, not after fighting alongside humans, not after seeing what real courage looked like. The council chairman's voice cut through the noise. You would abandon your people, your culture, everything you are? No, Vector said quietly. I would finally become what I was always meant to be. Not an observer of war, a warrior who understands what he fights for. The council had no immediate response. Asylum requests required formal votes and diplomatic procedures. But Vector did not wait. He gathered his datapad and walked out of the chamber. Captain Taiho was waiting outside. The human captain had attended the council session as a witness. He smiled when Vector emerged. That went well. I am no longer welcome among my own people, but you're welcome among mine. The offer stands. Join the crew of Defiant Hope. Vector looked at the human captain. Tai-Ho was still recovering from injuries sustained in the battle. His face was bruised, his arm was in a medical brace, but his eyes were clear and steady. I am not a soldier. I do not know human military protocols. I may be more burden than help. You're someone who understands why we fight. That's more valuable than any tactical training. Tai-Ho extended his hand, a human gesture of agreement. Welcome to the crew, Vector. No more observer, no more analyzing from a distance. You're one of us now. Vector took the offered hand. The contact felt strange, human skin against Qualthari hide, but it also felt right. 2 days later, Vector attended his first memorial service as crew rather than observer. It was held aboard Defiant Hope in the main cargo bay. The entire surviving fleet sent representatives. Hundreds of humans gathered to honor their dead. Lieutenant Hana read the names. All 2,347 of them. It took hours. Some names she read clearly. Others made her voice break. The crew stood in silence, listening to each name. When she reached Private Suji's name, Hana's voice failed completely. Sergeant Junho stepped forward to continue, but he could not read her name either. The young woman who had fought beside Vector, who had stood in front of the memorial wall and talked about her brother, was now added to that wall. Vector found himself moving forward without conscious thought. He took the datapad from Junho's shaking hands. Private Suji, he read, his voice steady. Private Minho, Specialist Daehoon, Captain Jiwon, Commander Hyon, Ensign Kira. He read them all. Every name Junho could not. His Qualthari accent turned the human names strange, but he spoke them with reverence. Each name was followed by the human response, hundreds of voices speaking in unison. We remember. We honor. We carry forward. After the service, Dr. Yuna found him standing in front of the memorial wall. She had aged visibly in the last weeks. Dark circles under her eyes, new lines on her face. But she smiled when she saw him. You changed, observer. I am no longer an observer. And yes, I changed. I had no choice. None of us do. Not really. She looked at the wall. Every battle changes us. Every person we lose takes something from us. The trick is making sure it doesn't take everything. How do you do that? By remembering why we fight. By honoring the fallen. By making sure their sacrifice meant something. She turned to face him. You're part of that now. Part of us. That's a heavy burden. I understand. I choose to carry it. 6 months passed. Vector served aboard Defiant Hope as a tactical advisor. He translated human instinctive combat into terms other species could understand. He trained officers from allied species in what he called adaptive warfare. His reports on human tactics became required reading at the Galactic Military Academy, but they were no longer reports about humans. They were reports from a human crew member who happened to be Qualthari. The Draviks returned with another fleet. The Council, facing annihilation, voted to request human military assistance. They asked formally, diplomatically, as if the humans owed them nothing. Admiral Hana, promoted after the Theta Sector victory, gave the response. Vector stood beside her during the transmission. She looked at the Council representatives with hard eyes. You watched us nearly die. You debated whether we were worth saving. Now you need us. We'll come. Not because you deserve it. Not because you helped us when we needed it. We'll come because people are dying. That's what you've never understood about us. We don't help because of politics. We help because it's right. The human fleet deployed to the contested sectors. 50 ships still using patched-together equipment and outdated weapons. But now they had allies. Other species had learned from Vectar's reports. They adopted human tactics. They fought with adaptation rather than rigid doctrine. Vectar commanded his own vessel now, a joint human Qualthari crew. They called it Shared Purpose. The name was his suggestion. It represented what he had learned. On the bridge of Shared Purpose, Vectar stood in the command chair and watched the battle displays. Dravik's ships filled the sensors, too many to count. But the Allied fleet did not retreat. His first officer, a young Qualthari named Tev Khan, looked at the numbers with fear. "Commander, we are heavily outnumbered. Standard Qualthari protocols recommend withdrawal." Vectar thought about Captain Taiho standing on a damaged bridge, refusing to retreat. About Lieutenant Hana making impossible shots through tears and determination. About Private Suji standing guard over her brother's memory. "We do not follow standard protocols on this ship," Vectar said. "We follow human protocols. We fight for each other. We adapt. And we never, ever give up." Tevkan stared at him. "But the numbers are just numbers. They don't account for will, for determination, for people who refuse to lose." Vectar activated the ship-wide communication. "All hands, battle stations. We're going in." As Shared Purpose charged into the battle, Vectar felt something he had never experienced before his time with humans. Not fear, not doubt, but hope. Hope that they would survive. Hope that they would win. Hope that even if they fell, others would carry on. He was no longer the observer who had watched from safety, recording and analyzing without understanding. He was a warrior who fought for something larger than himself. He was crew. He was human in the ways that mattered, and that changed everything.